bodily emissions that we'll look at from childbirth, from sexuality, etc. And is it pure, impure? And this particular scholar, I wanted to know what you thought, Brad, suggests that these things are not considered unclean, even though that's the word they use, but they're like a holy experience of life. And that if you're having this experience of childbirth or sexuality or being cleansed from a disease, you don't need to give sacrifices. Did you see that, Brad? And so it's another kind of, it's the last paragraph or the last two on the far right side, that these rituals are sacred. This experience brings you closer to God, so you don't need to go to the temple. Because all of these things prohibit you from going to the temple until they're over. And I just want everybody to keep this in mind if you agree with that idea that these are holy experiences that connect you to God. That's what this particular rabbi's commentary says in the Eitz Chaim Chumash, which I highly recommend if you don't have it, because it has lots of different commentaries underneath each sentence, contemporary and classical, which are interesting to look at. So we're starting with Tazria, which is Leviticus. First of all, I'm sorry. So I was told that before you start your class, people have a moment to share if anything is going on with you that's happy or important or whatever. So before we begin, how are you all? How are you doing? Shabbat Shalom. Let's have like a relational moment, as they say. And anybody have any news to share about anything going on in your life that you would like to share with the group? No.
There's a wonderful turnout last night at services.
Oh my God, yeah, it was. Oh yes. Harvin Mara, one of you is raising your hand.
That would be me.
Okay.
I just wanted to let the whole group know that some of you might remember back in 2024, I had shared a poem with the whole group and had dedicated it to uh, Rabbi David's. And so I'm excited to announce that the CCAR Journal, the Reformed Jewish Quarterly, has accepted that poem in memory of Rabbi David's.
Oh, Mazel Tov, that's beautiful. Wow.
Mazel tov.
Will you let us know when it's coming out? So
I will. It's supposed to be in the summer issue, but I will let everyone know.
so you just, take a chance and submit it and see what happened. Is that how you did it?
I often submit poems to journals, and I just thought it was appropriate for us to, for me to have a poem um, in memory of Rabbi David's, and that was exactly the place to have it because it was for a Jewish audience, not just a more general audience.
And I'm sure many people knew him who will be reading that poem. That's beautiful. Beautiful. Mazel Tov. That's lovely. Anybody else have anything they want to share?
In reference to what Mara said about her poem, I was at the CCAR convention as the co-chair of the Friends of the CCAR, and there wasn't a workshop or a meeting that most of us went to that Rabbi David's wasn't mentioned and honored. It was really special.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. More people coming. Yes, Steve, you raising?
Mona.
Mona?
Congratulations, Mara. I wanted to share with the group that I'll have a play with some Jewish themes. It's a comedy read on Saturday afternoon, May 31st. It's a short play. It's a whole afternoon starting at 2:00 p.m. at the Westwood Public Library, which is on Glendon, a block south of Wilshire.
Free.
It's free. Parking will be free, and you'll get to hear 5 totally different plays and one fiery monologue. And my play is called You Can't Get Away from Christmas. So I hope you'll come. It should be an interesting afternoon, and there are even free refreshments.
What is the date and time again, Mona, please?
Saturday afternoon, May 31, starting at 2 p.m. It'll go from about 2 to 4:30 or 2 to 5. The playwrights and the actors stay at the end so the audience can ask them questions.
Very nice. Congratulations.
Thank
Talented.
you. And congratulations, Mara. That's wonderful news.
It is, absolutely. Wait, anything else before we begin? This is great. Okay, well, I know you all are very talented, so if things come up that you want to share, please let us know. I'll just let you know if you're interested that on June 1st at the temple, there's going to be, it's for Shavuot, a concert called Bible Women, and it's going to be performed by Cantor Peacock and 5 other women cantors. And it was written by, I don't know if you know she was, but she was very big in the 70s and 80s. Elizabeth Swados was a very avant-garde, amazing composer. And she's written, it's this very, contemporary hip sort of cantata or opera, whatever, of all the different biblical women, and I'm going to be writing the narrative in between each of the women, and it's going to be performed. So that's going to be 5 p.m. on Sunday, June 1st. Free, also free. So just if you want to come to that. Okay.
In the Wilshire, it said tickets were $20.
It did. They're charging.
Yeah, so, I'm sorry. The tickets are $18 for the Bible Women concert.
Okay. I didn't know that. That's another issue that I won't talk about. Okay. I have my opinions about charging. Okay, so
I guess that means we do have to pay.
yes, but it's $18, so you can have, it does cost every single time we open. We have to pay for the security, which is very strong, the maintenance, and I always like to have food at any event I have, so we have to pay for that. So it's anyway, we're on chapter 12 of the book of Leviticus. Tazria is the name of the parsha, Tazria. And I'd like to just read, the first part is about childbirth. And so would somebody read, and then we'll talk about it. So would somebody read the first, who wants to read a little bit of the text?
I'll read.
Chapter 12. Who said I will?
I
Howard,
did.
go ahead. Hi, good morning. Nice to
Hi.
see
Good morning. Chapter 12.
you. In Leviticus, yes.
And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the Israelites, saying, Should a woman quicken with seed and bear a male, she shall be unclean 7 days, as in the days of her menstrual unwellness, she shall be unclean. And on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised, and 30 days and 3 she shall stay in her blood purity. She shall touch no consecrated thing, nor shall she come into the sanctuary until the days of her purity are completed. And if she bears a female, she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her menstruation, and 6 days and 6 she shall stay over her blood purity. And when the days of her purity are completed,
Okay, let's stop here. Okay, so in my translation, for the word is tameh, it says impure, not unclean. So I think it's interesting the difference between. So in your mind, what's the difference between unclean and impure? Let's just start with that. What's the difference between impure and unclean? When you think about it. Yes, Steve.
Looking at some of the commentary in the book I'm looking at, unclean seems to be a very earthly concept, whereas this seems impure in this sense seems to be spiritual or related to our relationship with God as opposed to actual clean or dirty.
Yeah. Anybody? I think you're correct. I agree. Anybody have any other thoughts about the difference between unclean and impure? Okay, so they talk about it, and why would a woman be impure from giving birth?
Well, I have a thought.
Yes.
I mean, blood can get impure. I mean, blood does carry disease. It's not always pure human, I can't explain it exactly because I'm not a physician, but people die from sepsis, which is circulated in the blood.
But there's something about blood in Judaism altogether. There's a taboo of any kind of contact with blood, not just menstrual blood. And also they're talking about the bleeding after she gives birth, which is not menstruation, it's the bleeding. But, when we do any kind of animal sacrifice, we always spill out the blood and we are not allowed to use the blood. And also right before this, in the last week's portion, it was about kashrut and kosher, where, we're not allowed to eat the blood and we salt everything to remove the blood. So there's something about contact with blood that seems to be taboo. And Howard.
So I'm looking at the translation in Sepharia of the word tamei,
Oh, good.
and it doesn't have any. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 meanings, but none
Well,
of
let's
them
hear them. Let's hear them.
to be or become unclean, to defile oneself, be defiled, to defile, to pronounce unclean, declare unclean, to be defiled, to be unclean, to be.
That's interesting. So in the Eitz Chaim, and I think the Jewish Publication Society too, which are more contemporary or not classical translations, they say impure. And they do see it as more of a spiritual uncleanliness than a literal physical. Did you want to say
The latest JPS 1985 says unclean.
Okay, this one I think is past that, but it's interesting, unclean. Any other thoughts about that? So I want to just take a moment and talk about circumcision and this idea that a covenant between God and men, there doesn't seem to be any formal covenant between women and God, is the cutting of the penis, this ritual cutting. And does anybody have any thoughts of why that would be the ritual or the covenant? And why it's done at such a young age? Yes, Mona. Mona?
I think it's painful and dramatic, and while the baby won't remember it, we hope the parents will. So it's an intergenerational thing. I also think with the blood, they were an ancient people who were scared. They found these biological processes frightening. These women are bleeding. Childbirth is incredibly painful, and there must have been a lot of screaming and moaning and blood. So I think there's an association with some kind of dramatic distress and pain.
Are we talking about the impurity now or the uncleanliness, or just, is that what you're saying?
Yes, that. And why would blood be part of a covenant? It manifests the seriousness of it. You don't go through this for nothing.
Right. But the covenant is not, yes, and I'm Brad, I know your hand is up, I'm going to call you. There's no formal covenant between God and a mother who gives birth. The formal covenant is between God and a man who cuts a piece of his penis off. And that's considered like my covenant with God. So, Brad, what do you think?
Well, it was a practice in that part of the world when you sealed a deal to grab the testicles of the other party. That's where testicles are in the same family of words.
Right.
So it's not surprising that you're using that part of the body then to seal the deal with God. But it's also interesting because later on in the Torah, they talk about the circumcision of the heart.
That's right.
So that is a much more generalized covenant that would also apply to women as well as to men.
Yes, yes, the circumcision of the heart, and it's referring to don't be hard-hearted. So I guess physical circumcision of the of the penis is making you vulnerable. We do know that when Abraham asks his servant to go to find a wife for Isaac, he says, "Put your hand on my thigh and make a vow." And really, he's meaning, put your hand on my testicles and make a vow. So to make a solemn vow, you touched that, and that's where the word testimony and testament comes from. But it seems perhaps it's okay, Steve, before I continue. Steve.
I was going to say, it seems that blood is in our DNA or something, because even little kids who know nothing, when they kind of want to have their lifetime friendship pact,
Mhm.
they prick their fingers and share their blood. Now, they
Right.
never heard of any of this, and yet there's something inherent in blood that it's like the deepest, most important part of your life force or something.
That's very interesting. You're right. There is something about blood. I want to read you two commentaries that I found um, that I thought you'd find interesting. On the eighth day of the flesh, this is from I think it's from the Midrash. Isaac and Ishmael were engaged in a controversy. Said Ishmael to Isaac, "I am more beloved to God than you, since I was circumcised at the age of 13. But you were circumcised as a baby and could not refuse." Isaac retorted, "All that you gave up to God was 3 drops of blood, but lo, I am now 37 years old, and if God desired me that I be slaughtered, I would not refuse." And that's like talking about the sacrifice of Isaac. So there's an argument going on. Um, Jewishness is not a matter of historical consciousness, outlook, ethics, or even behavior. It's a state of being. This is the deeper significance of the debate between Ishmael and Isaac. When the Jew is circumcised on the 8th day of life, he is completely unaware of the significance of what has occurred. But this non-experience is what circumcision means. With circumcision, the Jew says, "I define my relationship with God not by what I think, I feel, or do, but by the fact of my Jewishness," which equally applies to an infant of 8 days or a sage of 80 years. Of course, this commentary is referring to a male, because female has doesn't. Oh, that was from that commentary afterwards. The Midrash was the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I just and why there's a mystical reason why it's the 8th day, and then we're going to go back to the text according to one of the Kabbalistic texts called Kli Yakar. I love this. The number 7 represents the natural, and the number 8 represents the holy. This is why circumcision on the 8th day takes precedence over Shabbat, the 7th day. That's what it says. So even on Shabbat, you still circumcise, which is very rare that you actually do some kind of ritual. It's cutting and whatever. But even if the bris would even be on Shabbat, and they're saying it's a regular thing and this is holy. I actually think 7 is holy and 8 could be supernatural. You know what I mean? It's on a higher level, but it's a mystical idea. So let's go back to this idea that if you have a boy, you're only impure or unclean, tameh, for 7 days, but if you have a girl, it's for 14 days. Any thoughts about that or why that might be? Cindy, and then Mara.
It doesn't directly relate, but I'm thinking about the high rate of infant death. And perhaps if a boy made it 33 days, you could feel secure he would not die, but a girl's might be weaker, which I don't think is true. And you wanted to wait the 66 days to make sure that they were going to survive.
Yes, she was separated for those separate times, though it says that you're impure for 7 days, impure.
Yeah.
But I like that idea.
But it also forces her to stay at home and have time to care for the babies without going to this temple.
I like that. I like that. And There's Mara.
I was just going to point out something in the, excuse me, in the women's commentary,
Yes.
which says the renowned anthropologist Mary Douglas offers another interpretation of the role of circumcision in the context of postpartum impurity. She writes that circumcision played a protective role for mother and son, so that they were perceived as safer than a mother and daughter. This enhanced protection allowed the new mother and her son to venture out sooner, whereas a mother and her daughter had to lie low to avoid danger. Impurity was viewed as having a protective function. One might ask, protection from what? Douglas's theory assumes that the people of ancient Israel retained a strong fear of demons. The Torah, however, makes no obvious allusion to such a fear. A baby boy who had completed his first week of life is ready for entrance into the covenant, similar to the acceptability of an animal for sacrifice after it had completed its first week of life.
That's very interesting. That a baby boy was more protected because of the Brit. Is that what it's basically saying? The Brit gives you holy protection against evil forces, we'll say, whereas the girl was more vulnerable, and so she needed longer to be separated. Oh, I think I like that. Howard.
I'm wondering whether what modern commentators are sort of twisting themselves pretzels and trying to avoid saying, but maybe was very prevalent in the ancient primitive societies, was the idea that the female impurity or uncleanliness is far more powerful than that of other male or other genders.
The female impurity of, and even as a little baby female, you're saying.
Yeah, because female is more powerful, more dangerous. I mean, you can't, a woman in the United States couldn't even touch the Torah until recently, so it's not even ancient.
You're right.
But it's certainly obsolete.
Yes. Also, I read a commentary which I shared yesterday that the female, I don't know if it's more powerful, more vulnerable, or whatever, herself carries the potential to create life, because someday she'll grow up and be able to give birth. So whether she carries more impurity or more power or needs more protection, like Mara said, for that reason, it could be that, as opposed to girls are just more impure because they're female.
Powerful.
No, but I'm saying one could just do
Dangerous.
simplistic interpretation. These are much more lofty, more spiritual, more interesting, more nuanced, more complex. So I think you're right. Any other thoughts about the double time for the female child? Anyone else? Okay. Brad, you're not raising your hand, right? Okay. So let's continue now. When it's over, what does she have to do? So who would like to read this part? Somebody, verse 6. Verse 6, come on.
I can read it.
Okay, thanks.
And when the days of her purifying are completed, whether for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring to the priest at the door of the tent of meeting a lamb a year old for burnt offering, and a young pigeon or turtle dove for sin offering.
Keep going, just finish.
And she shall offer it before the Lord and make atonement for her, and then she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law for her who bears a child, either male or female. And if she cannot afford a lamb, then she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. And the priest shall make atonement for her, and she shall be clean.
So I think it's interesting. I just noted that, the offerings are baby animals. They're young animals like her child. It's if in their first year, a lamb, a pigeon, a turtle dove. So but okay, I did talk about this yesterday, so I'm sorry for those who were in the class. I don't think they should put me with this and in a row, but why a sin offering? If you weren't there yesterday, the burnt offering or the olah, which means going up from the aliyah, olah, it's the same word. And one could even say now you are elevated because you're a mother. And we know in society, you're definitely elevated in biblical society. That was your claim to fame. That was your fulfillment, and you were elevated and honored and celebrated. But why a sin offering?
I wrote down from one of our studies that the guilt offering was due to perhaps language that escaped the mother's mouth during the birthing process.
That's right. That's what the commentary says, that she may make an oath and say, oh my God, I'm never having another child again. I'm never having sex with my husband again. I'm never doing it ever, ever while she's giving birth. And so the rabbi said, and she may say this, she doesn't mean it. So she'll do the guilt offering to say, oh, this oath doesn't mean anything. I love that. I love that idea. So that was so it's interesting that we're going in order. So the first thing is when you're born, these are the laws. And every single thing in these two chapters is about emissions from the body in some way or another, which people were dealing with. So now let's move on to this skin disease, which we call leprosy, but it's not clear what it was, but there's a skin disease here coming up now. So who would like to read some about this delightful skin disease? Called Sa'arat. That's where Tazria comes from. They call it Sa'arat. We don't really know what it is. Some kind of complex. The term Sa'arat probably designated a complex of various ailments, but they seem to be some kind of skin disease. It's unlikely if it was leprosy. Not really, but that's how it's called in some translations. Okay, who would like to read? Natalie, would you like to read? You're muted, though.
Okay. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when a person has on the skin of his body a swelling, a rash, or a discoloration, and it develops into a scaly affection on the skin of his body, it shall be reported to Aaron the priest or to one of his sons, the priests. The priest shall examine the affection on the skin of his body. If the hair in the affected patch has turned white and the affection appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is a leprous affection. When the priest sees it, he shall pronounce him unclean. But if it...
Let's stop for a minute.
Okay.
So it's very interesting. If you look in the Eitz Chaim, it talks about this, and this something, Brad, you mentioned yesterday about the priest also being the medical man or whatever. So what is the significant? Well, Brad, do you want to read this paragraph on page 652? At least three things of worthy are, it's small print. Do you need reading glasses?
No, I've got it.
Okay.
This is at least three things are worthy of note regarding the role of the Kohen in treating leprous afflictions. First, in the biblical Israel, the Kohen was both the religious and medical authority. The biblical mind saw the connection between the physical and the spiritual dimensions of illness and recovery. When the Kohen visited the afflicted person in isolation and examined the person's sores, the experience of being cared for by the most prestigious person in the community must have helped generate healing powers in the sick person.
So yes, yes. So it's interesting. I have to be honest because I've read this many times. I never really I thought about the disease and the symptoms and the isolation and the impurity. But what's pointed out here and that we should look at is the care by the community and by the Kohen, the highest, most important person in the community, for the sick person, for the afflicted person, that they're not just banished and go fend for yourself or whatever. They're set aside somewhere, and the Kohen visits them on a regular basis. So I'm sure we remember, all of us, the days when the doctor made house calls and used to come to our house when you were sick. And it was such a difference when they were taking care of you in your own house than you're sitting in that waiting room, sick as a dog, waiting to go in or whatever. So there's a different kind of emotional connection when this person is tending to you in person where you are. So I mean, it's pretty interesting. And the rabbis, I did talk about this yesterday too, connected the skin disease with behavior, ethical behavior, um, not just a physical illness, but a spiritual lacking or failing. And I shared this yesterday. Does anybody know what it is? Does anybody have any idea what it is, what it was? If you know the story of Miriam, because you studied Torah for 7 years, what happened with Miriam? Who remembers? Cindy.
She commented that Moses was married to a Cushite, which is a black woman, Ethiopian or someone African, and she got leprosy and
Or this skin disease. She got
skin
some.
disease. Like,
Yeah.
well, my book always says leprosy, but yeah, whatever. And Moses said, heal her now, which is the origin of our Mishabeach.
Misha yes.
Mishabeach.
And so what was her sin?
That she gossiped.
Yes. So, though, actually, if you want to go deeper into that event, does everybody remember that event? Do you all know that event? It's when they're in the desert and she speaks to Aaron and she says he's married to a Cushite. He married a Cushite. That's all she says. And she breaks out into skin disease, and there's lots of midrashim about what she actually was saying. Was it negative? Was it positive? And interestingly enough, Aaron does not get any punishment, just Miriam, which I think is interesting. And the rabbis say that when you gossip, three people are affected and afflicted. And who would that be? Who would that be? The three people. Who would, Marina?
The person who speaks, the person who hears, and the person who is discussed.
Yes. And the person who's discussed, their reputation could be destroyed, for no reason or whatever. And then, so Lashon Hara, as it's said in Hebrew, is considered as bad as murder in Judaism, according to the Talmud. Talking about blood, the blushes or the humiliation and the red that goes into your cheeks of the humiliation is considered as if you've spilled blood when you do Lashon Hara. And there's this association between leprosy or the skin disease and gossip. And then you go, okay. So then, I mean, if we read this section, I would like to jump around a little bit. It's then he goes in 7 days, and if it's worse, unless you want to read the details. Do you want to read the details about it? No. Anybody want to read the details? It's like very, very detailed. And then if there's this color hair and that color hair, I mean, what's interesting do you think, about the priest having to go back and back and back and back to keep checking? What do you think is interesting about that, or important or meaningful? Cindy.
Well, it's the attention that the ill person is getting, that they feel cared for and somebody is concerned about them getting better or not.
Right. And visiting the sick, there's a list, it's in our Siddur. It's like, these are the things that you get one portion in this world and most of the portion in heaven. Do you know that list? Have any of you aware of that list of, like, I call them the super mitzvahs. There's 10 super mitzvahs, and it's in the I can read it to you because I think it's really interesting. Hold on. Because it's in the daily Siddur, not the Shabbat Siddur. It's the festival Siddur, festival morning Siddur, and it says, if I can- these are the things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruit of the world while the principle remains in the world to come. What does that mean? These are the things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruit of the world while the principle remains in the world to come. What does that mean? Does anybody have any idea what that means? And then it lists a bunch of things that I'm going to share with you. These are the things, or these are the mitzvahs that are limitless in terms of your rewards that you receive for performing them. You enjoy some of the rewards in this world. You enjoy the fruit of your rewards in this world, but the principle remains in heaven, in the world to come, in Olam Haba. In other words, if you do these things, you will get rewards in this world, but you'll get the bigger reward in the next world because they're such high. And one of them, and they are honoring one's father and mother, engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study, that's you, morning and evening, graciously with guests, visiting the sick. Visiting the sick is considered one of the highest mitzvot, providing for the wedding couple and accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer, and making peace among people. I call these the super mitzvahs. If you do these, you're good with God, in my opinion. These are the top. But the study of Torah encompasses them all, because studying Torah, you will then learn them all. This is a very famous quote from the Talmud. And so visiting the sick, which we're talking about here, the priest, and you can imagine that most people, if somebody is broken out in a scaly disease, they're going, I'm not going near that person. Forget it. And yet the priest comes in and not just, he looks at him, he touches him, or he engages with him. So it's a big deal. And so visiting the sick, and especially an important person, can have a huge, huge impact on people. Okay. So we're going to go, then it's head to foot, blah, 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 blah. And then we're going to go to it also, and when you're done, and I talked about this yesterday, you have to do a sacrifice with birds, and you do a mixture with cedar and hyssop and the blood of one of the birds. And Rashi says the reason that you do a sacrifice with birds is because they twitter like gossip, and it's a symbolic of gossip. And that the cedar stands for how haughty you were beforehand, there's an accusation, or how strong you will become. And the hyssop was low, so you were brought low, but you're lifting yourself. So Rashi explains that's the sacrifice you give when you're cured. But what's interesting, let's go to chapter 13, verse 45. No. Or in this section, it talks about your clothes being affected. Your clothes being affected. And you have to burn your clothes. Okay. All right, let's look at verse 45, though. Who would like to, chapter 13, verse 45? Somebody?
I'll read.
Lynn, okay.
As for the person with a leprous affection, the clothes shall be rent, the head shall be left bare, and the upper lip shall be covered over, and that person shall call out, impure, impure. The person shall be impure as long as the disease is present. Being impure, that person shall dwell apart in a dwelling outside the camp.
So what do you think about how, is this a positive thing, a negative thing, a shaming thing to do this, to be forced to do this? What do you think?
Prevent the spread of whatever it is.
It would.
It's good.
It,
Any other thoughts about what the reaction would be? Nobody has any opinions? Are you sure you people are Jewish? You're so quiet this morning. Thoughts about
Afraid to say what we really think.
Yeah, what do you really think? That's what it's all about.
Well, this was written 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and they didn't know what they were talking about. So they could pretend to, they could write it any way they want here. And we know now, of course, that a lot of this is not true, what they thought.
Well, I agree. Yeah.
So as we read it now, it's almost, how in the world? First of all, they put women definitely down below the men with all this, what we talked about, childbirth and having to lie there 2 more weeks with the daughter. It's just a reflection of this amazing Torah that was written so long ago, trying to interpret, in this case, what we know medically is not true, but that most of this is the most amazing written book ever, that it still applies today of human nature with all the other things. So that's my report.
Okay, so I agree with you, but what I find amazing, and I've said that, is that it was a primitive, and an antiquated, written in antiquated times, primitive times in terms of vision, but that over the centuries, the rabbis and commentators have been able to overlay it with humane interpretation or holy interpretation.
Right.
Or elevated. It's like we don't take it literally. We go, or we try to understand it in a way that we can live with. And Reform Jews or progressive Jews, the things we can't live with, we say, I'm not doing it. I don't live with it. I'm not stoning the adulterer or my child, my wayward son. I'm not stoning him in the market square, which you can do according to the Torah, or stoning someone who doesn't observe Shabbat. We just say no. But other things we look at, but there's such a detailed rituals for dealing with all this. Psychologically, it must have had some impact beyond just the physical dealing with it. It had to, if we're looking at magic and demons and God and all that stuff. So there's this level too. Mara, you had your hand up.
Right. You're definitely right on that.
Well, I was just, no, I lost it. I was struck by the comment about the verse about the upper lip,
Yeah.
which I've now lost.
How it says, yeah, his head shall be left there and he shall cover his upper lip.
And I found that really interesting because you're talking about all this physical stuff, but the implications of covering your lip, going back to gossip.
Oh, yeah.
And going back to the importance of speech. And then I would just take a further step in terms of what we were just talking about, that we look at the Torah and say, well, all these things we're reading about are somewhat primitive and outdated. But in fact, if the Torah is a living document, then our interpretations of all of this are a testament to our ability to become closer to divinity and closer to an understanding of what God wants us to understand, the essence that's being communicated by the Torah.
Yes, I agree with you. And in this case, a big essence for me in the reading of it this time is the care that they're taking of this afflicted person and the concern that they're taking. But now I'm curious what you think about them being forced to walk around and go impure, impure. So yeah, it'll keep people away. Brad, you have your hand up, and then other people.
Rabbi, I'm coming back to the point that you made at the very beginning about our confusion between uncleanliness and impurity. And what are we dealing with here? I mean, do they have a concept of somebody is contagious from an uncleanly point of view? Or is the person being isolated just because they're ritually impure? And it has nothing to do with cleanliness. So, there's this confusion about the terms, and if somebody is contagious, then why is the priest in contact with that person? So it seems to me that we're dealing not, I don't know why I'm getting this echo, but it seems to me that we're not dealing with uncleanliness here.
Excuse me, I think it's Howard needs to mute. The echo's coming from him.
Wow. Okay.
So it seems to me we're not dealing with uncleanliness, but we're dealing with some kind of ritual impurity. And that's why people are being isolated.
Okay. Thank you. I have thoughts on this, but I want to hear from other people. But let me just ask you this. Are we reading it contemporarily and the rabbis afterwards and talking about this being not just a physical impurity? Was it originally just a physical impurity? And when the rabbis say it was gossip and this and that, is that the next level of interpretation? Or originally was it just physical impurity is the question? Rebecca.
I am not a physician, but I have worked in medical facilities for 26 years. And I think it's for the protection of the community. I don't think this is a primitive thing whatsoever. It's just for the preservation of the community. So for instance, in the nursing home, if a person had lice, oh my God, it was like a major catastrophe. Everything had to be pulled out of that room and bagged and washed separately. Anti-lice
similar to this, yeah,
was distributed to all the employees as well as anyone that was close to that room with that person that became infected with lice. And just think back to even COVID, how people were isolated to prevent the spread of that particular disease. So actually, I think that the separation, as it was in a primitive culture, was actually very advanced thinking.
I was actually referring to the female being separated double for the baby girl and this and that, not this part, but you're right. You're right. It is very practical and pragmatic. And going around saying impure, impure, I'm impure, stay away. The commentary is that one does not only warn others, but also to elicit compassion and prayers on one's behalf. The Misha Barak, you're saying I'm sick, so this is the rabbinic interpretation, which again, there's always this humane, compassionate layer that I find oftentimes from the rabbi and the Talmud. Marina, and then two others.
I look at things more practical than metaphorical sometimes, and I agree with Rebecca that the destruction of clothes looks like sanitation to me. The cover of upper lip,
yeah,
it's face mask. And the announcement of unclean, unclean. In Middle Ages, a person with leprosy was supposed to carry a bell announcing that that's a leper and for people not to come close. So yes, as you said, both stay away from me and pray for me.
Yes, and they wore masks during the plague. By the way, and then during the Black Plague in the Middle Ages, Jews got the plague less than other the rest of the population. Number one, because we ritually washed our hands before every meal, and also this kind of separation. So and then they blamed the Jews and said, you must be cursing us because how come you're not as sick as we are? Because you're not getting it and we are. And because they were, and we had mikvah, we had bath, we had bathing, we had things from antiquity that we were doing for sanitation, cleanliness, illness, and then we were blamed for that. Now it says two other people raised their hands. Who are they? Steve and Mona, and anyone else?
No, Mona.
Okay, so Steve and then
It's Mona.
Okay.
and or Mona, and then
I
Howard.
was just going to say that I'm struck that they seem to think that illness or disease has some connection to one's moral actions or conduct. That you well, like with Miriam, she engaged in this gossip, which was undoubtedly negative, and she gets punished. And I mean, this is an attitude that has persisted for a long time, that there's something morally wrong with you if you get seriously ill.
Mental illness, they said, was the devil.
Yeah.
So you were cursed. So you're absolutely right. That is an old thinking, but the rabbis point out that it's something that you can correct, like gossiping or whatever, that there's an atonement to be made. Whereas I don't know that in other places when you have illness, there's any atonement. Here, there's like an atonement. And again, there's a whole psychological level for the ill person and the community. They went through this ritual of atonement and purifying and sacrifice. They're good now. So come back.
Maybe they were kinder than, I have visions of that scene in Game of Thrones where they force Cersei Lannister to walk naked through the crowd, and they're yelling shame, 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 and everybody is like throwing things at her, spitting at her. So maybe the ancient Hebrews were kinder to the isolated sick people. I hope so.
We could talk about the sota, if you know the sota, but that's another thing. Howard, but you're muted. Howard, you're muted.
Sorry. So I think, well, two things. I'm pretty sure if the Jews in the Middle Ages had been infected more than the average population, we also would have been blamed. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah.
And secondly, well, it's totally different. The mustache, I mean, the upper lip is actually, I don't think, may not be correct. I think it's safam, and it's mustache. And
Right.
of course, it would not apply to women, obviously.
Let me look. Let me see. It says, yeah, you're right. But even if he's covering his mustache, it still would cover his face. I guess because he didn't shave his mustache yet. At a certain point, you shave your entire head and all your hair body before you're able to come back in to the community. I can't believe it's like 4 minutes to 10 already. Anybody else have some last thoughts? I saw that there were more. Brad, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I just responding to Mona for a second. I think there is a connection between your physical state and your mental state. I mean, doctors say, and I've been through this myself recently, that those people who have a positive attitude do better than those that don't. So I think your attitude is important. And then the other thing, Howard, again, please mute. The other thing I wanted to say was that, I just had a bone marrow transplant a couple months ago. Years ago, when they did a bone marrow transplant, the person was isolated for 3 months afterwards, for 100 days. Today, when they do a bone marrow transplant, there's no isolation. I was immediately encouraged to have family and friends and support around me. So, isolation, our feelings about isolation in certain respects have changed.
Thank you.
Can I say something? It's wonderful what you just said. I agree with everything you say. But I do. But it's true that we know today, I agree with that, if you have a positive attitude, it sort of helps you. However, in Judaism and in the way I was brought up, you have the fashrais, don't ever praise yourself. You're going to get a fashrai. Don't do this, don't do that. There's a lot of fear about don't praise your children, correct? At least that's the way
It's an evil
my
eye.
grandparents
Bringing the evil eye, Kanina Hora.
So I have that myself from coming down the generations. Don't praise yourself too much. And that I think is common in Jews, at least people who came from Poland, Russia, whatever. You could be third generation. It has come down. So if we know now that to be happy and up is better for you, where does all of this come from? I'd like to hear what people say.
I actually did some research on that, and this whole idea that you invite demons or devils or, to curse you through praise was medieval Christianity, and that the Jews lived in the society and they absorbed this idea of imps and demons and all that stuff, which wasn't really known in the Jewish culture until medieval times. And all the way, though, if you read Isaac Bashevis Singer, which is Yiddish of the 20th century, it's filled with imps and demons and ayin hara and all that stuff. So it has become part of the folk culture, but it wasn't originally Jewish. It came from the surrounding, because I don't think Sephardic Jews have it to the same degree. They do have something because
maybe not. I'm not from that.
Right.
The other.
Do tie red ribbon. Everybody, though, knows about Lilith, who was Adam's first wife, and she became a demon or a devil according to medieval, later times. And so I know Sephardic Jews tie red ribbons around their babies' cribs against Lilith, but I don't know about the praise and all that. I think that is and also probably keep a low profile. Just came from living as a minority in a country that was anti-Semitic. It was like, don't raise your head too high. Don't get too much attention, because that's when the pogroms will come or something. I think it's cultural, not religious, is my opinion on that.
I think I agree with you on that. But it's very powerful. And most people I know came from this kind of thinking. So it's just very interesting. I think it was a survival technique, is what you said, because life, and even today, they're out to get us. They're constantly out to get us. It never stops. They knock us down and we stand up again. And that's part of our history, our culture. It's what makes us, I think, incredibly wonderful as a group also. But there is what I just said. I believe it's very powerful and strong, opposite to what Brad said about being positive about it.
Well, I think you're right, but all the more amazing that in the Torah it says, when there's an ill person, go visit them, go take care of them,
yes,
them or whatever. Okay, last word, Steve.
I was just going to point out what I put in the chat, that there is such a thing as Jewish exorcism, which people think is all from Catholicism, and it predates Christianity. My understanding is it starts with David and the evil spirits that they needed to drive out of him, and went on from there. So a lot of these concepts.
Saul.
Right. So sorry.
David,
but it goes way back.
He was happy.
Right. But it goes way back. That's right.
You're right.
Sorry.
All right. Well, I would like to read the Kaddish list and conclude with Kaddish as it's a pleasure to study with you all. It really is. So we remember those, first of all, who passed away during the Shloshim. Michael Alkov, Gilda Luba Gold, Janet Gross, Judy Kessler, Marvin, Bunny Perliter, Jack Remoch, Jim Sherman, Michelle Wolf. And the Yortzites occurred during the past week. Does anybody have a Yortzeit that's here this morning? Howard, unmute. Mute.
Horrible. Reverb guy. My father, Sidney Weisberg.
Sydney Weisberg, thank you. So do you want me to read the whole list of everybody? Do you prefer that, or do we just want to go to Kaddish? I'm leaving it up to you. I know your custom is, but it's 3 pages long. Do you want to hear all the names? Somebody say yes or no. No? Mara says no.
Well, I believe in the custom, so I would say yes, but
Okay.
I think that, everybody doesn't go out to say Kaddish for people. And I think we put people there to say Kaddish and we have to say it on their behalf.
Okay.
I think it's too long.
It's too long. Well, I know we're going to be maybe changing that anyway, but all right, I'll read it today and let's talk about it next time. Pauline Adler, Aziz Aras Tujadeh, Lawrence Arnold, Ruth Gershanowitz, Baron Bass, Dolph Baum, Rose Bauman, Harriet Beck, Zach Bell, Francis Bokanek, Tamar Bornstein, Jules Bolville, Anna Brandis, Richard Browerman, Eli Brode, Steve Broidy, Molly Burton, John Katafo, Benjamin Chekhanov, Joseph Chizek, Chet Cohen, Manna Cohen, Solomon Cohen, Yetta Davidson, Frank Davis, Bruce Arthur Devlin, Irma Dahl, Ben Fenton, Herbert Emmanuel Fisher, Eugene Galen, Grace Geibelson, David Gelfand, Linda Gilbert, Herbert Ginsburg, Julius Ginsburg, Molly Gohl, Florence Sesson Goodman, Sylvia Gottenberg, Marjorie Ann Gould, Erwin Greenwald, Rose Gray, Lillian Harrison, Arthur Henry Heisler, Frida Haymont, Anna Calick, Sidney Jason Keith, Norton Kirschbaum, Selma Klin, Solomon Kakokhtov, Aaron Kosman, Joan Kreider, Arthur Layson, Saul Laska, Ruth Levine, Irma Mayer, Ruth Mayer, Beverly Miller, Howard Miller, Wolfie Nadelman, Lisa Block Olshansky, Helen Orland, Marcia Flug, Minna Picard, Dora Riesend, Ethel Roseman, Anna Rosen, Frank Rothman, Carol Grace Salinas, Michael Schwarz, Louis Schwimmer, Rose Schwimmer, Gary Shapiro, Ben Schreier, Elias Silverstein, Mark Sizemore, Israel Sonis, Aileen Weil Speed, Annette Starr, Dorothea Stokes, Sylvia Pankin Sutkin, Elsie Teitelbaum, Susie Temkin, Rhett Turner, Dorothy Walder, Evelyn Wallace, Nancy Weeks, Norma Jean Weiner, Irving Weisberg, Sydney Weisberg, Mickey Weiss, Philip Wexler, Stephanie White, Ronnie Wiesel, Melody Winnig, Barbara Wise, Sally Wool. We also remember those who gave their lives defending the United States of America and the state of Israel, and those who have died in senseless violence around the world and from disease, and no one who has someone to say Kaddish for them as we turn to page 294. Sorry. Oh, wrong Siddur. Sorry, hold on.
And Rabbi Nanis, while you're looking, can I also add my mother's name, Helena Nath?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yomad divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, v'agala v'zman kari v'yimru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach leolam olmei olmaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal Shmei d'kudasha brichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, v'amiram v'yoma v'yimru. Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shamaya, V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'mramav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imru Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Have a beautiful Shabbos, and I'll see you next time.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.
Bye.